Let's go ahead and reverence Father Yahweh. O righteous and eternal Father, whose name is Yahweh, this is your servant, Kohan Malachi Hawkins. I've been seed and servant of your last days, anointed witness, great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through and by the authority of your Son, Yahshua Messiah, High Priest over your house. As we come before you at this time, Father Yahweh, to rehearse the words of your great servant, Yisrayl Hawkins, Father Yahweh, that you have inspired him to bring to us in these last days so we can grasp the great plan that you have laid before your people from the beginning of time to now, Father. We do kindly ask of you, Heavenly Father Yahweh, to open our minds and bless us with this understanding so we can keep on being part of this work and helping your servant Yisrayl, Father Yahweh, doing our part to usher in your kingdom. We do thank you, praise you, and ask all these things in unity with the body of priests, being seed and servant of your last days, anointed witness, great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through our high priest, Yahshua Messiah, we pray. Hallelujah, Yahweh. When you may be seated. We're going to continue in the 12th book of Yisrayl. He who rules is Yahweh. Menorah. And what we're going to be covering tonight is chapter 4. That is found on page 28. The cause of confusion and the nuclear war it is bringing to all the earth. All right, so we're going to start off in verse 1. But what we're going to see now in verse 1 to 4, what Pastor is showing us in verse 1 to 4 is two kingdoms basically that is coming to completion at this time. The kingdom of mankind and the kingdom of Yahweh. The pastor goes on by saying, he says, Shalom everyone. He said, come on. He said, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Down in verse 2, he said, to the bottom of verse 1, he said, I hope you remember where we left off last week. He said, the war is coming. And definitely we can see that the war is coming. Now, it's definitely, we can see it now. Everyone else can too. Or at least a lot of them can see it. Those that are not totally spiritually blinded can see it. Down in verse 3, he said, the cloud, of course, that was for you all. That was for the house of Yahweh. We really need to push this thing. That couldn't have been done by anyone else except Yahweh and Yahshua. We are the only ones they are the only ones who have the power to control the firmament, and in that firmament they can actually write letters for us. Now Yahshua, the only how Yahshua was granted this power, Yahshua had to qualify. Right? And yes, Yahshua qualified by keeping the laws of Yahweh, but he also had to be the Son of Man. You know, Yahshua could not pre-exist in no form, because once he had pre-exist, that would have totally disqualified him for this position. You know, he can't be half man and half Malachim, or as the world say, half angel. If he was half man and half Malachim, he could not qualify, because the whole plan of Yahweh is for the Son of Man. Now, Yahshua didn't pre-exist either. So, you know, we have to get the Christian concept out of our mind. When we come to the house of Yahweh, you know, as Yahshua said, you can't mix new wine with old skin. Right? You can't mix the two of them. He said to renew your mind. Yahshua could not pre-exist and qualified to be part of Yahweh's kingdom. Because the kingdom basically is for the Son of Man. In verse 3, we continue to say, he said, there are only one who have the power to control the firmament, and in that firmament they can actually write letters to us. Verse 4, he said, listen closely. He said, I will explain this once again. Yahweh showed me the donkey looking at a cloud in front of him, intensely looking at a cloud in front of him. Now, just to rehearse slightly about the donkey in Genesis 49:11, right? For us to understand where directly what Pastor is speaking about here. You know, you have to remember the certain scriptures that Pastor brought forward. It's in Genesis 49:11. It said to the middle of that verse, it said, then his donkey's colt to the choicest branch or to the olive tree. You know, for your notes, Zechariah 4 verses 1 to 3, 11 to 14 talk about the olive branch and the olive tree. Now remember also in the King James Version rendered this word thither as bind. Right? And bind. And when we look at that word bind, what it really means, it means to seal. Right? To seal. So actually what Genesis 49:11 is saying, the donkey's colt is being sealed to that tree or that branch. And remember when Pastor saw this in the cloud, Pastor was going through a kind of emotional where he was, you know, in his mind, he was thinking, well, look, all his work is going down in vain. You know, he was kind of down at that time. And Yahshua and Yahweh showed him the donkey looking intensively at that cloud. Now, to understand what Yahweh and Yahshua actually showed Pastor, right? Because strange enough, the Apostle Shaul ended up showing us exactly what it really means, what that donkey intensely looking at that cloud really means. So let us just look at in Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Right, because what we're looking at, Pastor said the donkey was intensely looking at the cloud in front of him. And he goes on to say, he said, now later he showed that cloud. In fact, I kept saying, man, I would everyone could see that as I saw it, as he showed it to me. Right? So what we're looking at is that donkey intensely looking at that cloud. Now the Apostle Shaul, what we're looking at is that word that Pastor used, looking, and it's a simple word. Right? A lot of times we have a tendency to don't look at simple words. Right? Because okay, right now I'm looking at you. How complicated that is. Right? That ain't really complicated. But look at how Shaul explained the same word when he said, okay, let me just read it. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. And the title is, let us run the race with endurance. He said, therefore, since we are also surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sins which so easily entrapped us, and let us run the race that is set before us with endurance. So we're talking about running that race, completing that race, showing that we must have endurance. Verse 2 said, looking to Yahshua. That same word as the donkey, intensely looking at the cloud. Right? To say, looking to Yahshua. And at that time, Yahshua was already ascended into heaven. Right? And meet Yahweh. So this is what the Apostle Shaul is showing us here. Look towards Yahshua, or looking towards Yahshua. Meaning, well, look, the example that Yahshua set, the teaching that came from Yahshua. Right? the teaching that comes from Yahshua, and also that bread or the plan of Yahweh that Yahshua bring forth. This is what he's speaking about by looking towards Yahshua. But when you look at the word looking in Strong's Greek dictionary, Hebrew and Greek dictionary, is word number 872. Right? Now listen carefully what it means. To consider attentively. The donkey is looking at that tree. Right? What the tree represents? The tree represents Yisrayl Hawkins. Right? The olive tree will represent Yisrayl Hawkins. The donkeys represent us. Right? It said the donkey is intensively looking at the cloud. The first meaning is to consider attentively. And we know what the word consider means. It means to think carefully of. Right? To think carefully of. The second meaning is to look away from one thing so as to see another. Let me read it again. To look away from one thing so as to see another. Okay, keep that in mind. It also means to concentrate, to gaze upon. No, to concentrate, the gaze upon. So basically what we are actually doing with that donkey, actually looking upon that cloud, right? It means we are looking away from the sinful life that we once lived. Because you remember the meaning is to look away from one thing so as to see another. So what it is showing us when it says the donkey is looking at that cloud or that olive tree is looking away from our sinful lives so we can see the lives that Yahweh is offering us. That is what catch the donkey, staring at that olive tree, intensely staring at that olive tree. And as I mentioned before, that is us intensively looking at Pastor for that guidance, right? For the guidance, for us to qualify to be part of Yahweh's kingdom. And this is what the same thing, what the Apostle Shaul, is showing the disciples and that to look intensively to Yahshua. Right? So, it's no difference. So Pastor goes on to say, intensively looking at the cloud in front of him. He said, no. Later, he showed that cloud. In fact, I kept saying, man, I would everyone could see that as I saw it, as he showed it to me. Now let us go. Let's go over to verse 8. He said, well, as I was going off the stage, the priest said, I think I have a picture of that. I think I took a picture of that, and I will find it if you want me to, or try to find it. So the next week, then he told me, yes, he found the picture. He put it with the tree. And it fit perfectly, he said. Verse 9. So the cloud he showed to me on the 25th of August, he put it in front of the priest, September 28th. That was the feast of that was the feast of trumpets, or the feast of Yahweh's seventh work. Like you see right here, the feast of Yahweh's seventh work. And what we have to understand with this Feast of Trumpets, the seventh work of Yahweh, we have to realize the workload that pastor really have. Because being the seventh trumpeter, being the seventh work, the whole complete plan of Yahweh is upon Yisrayl Hawkins' shoulder right now. To complete that plan. Everyone who qualify, that whole burden is on Yisrayl Hawkins right now. The finishing plan of Yahweh's work. Right? And when we look to Yahshua, when we look at Yahshua, Yahweh showed us in Yahshua's life, the prophecies of Genesis 1:26. Not only what keeping the laws, or that it was possible for someone to keep the laws of Yahweh, but he also showed us the prophecies where the Son of Man will have that rulership over every single thing that Yahweh created. So the whole family, or the whole plan of Yahweh is right now is waiting for us. Right? Every single one who Yahweh have called. As mentioned several times, no one came here by coincidence. Right? No one came here by coincidence. Yahweh had that plan. Just as he had Yahshua in his mind for thousands of years, he had each and every one in his mind for thousands of years. And that is what Pastor is doing. He's ushering in the last remnant of Yahweh's plan, calling us. Pastor mentioning about that bread that come from heaven, the teaching. That is how we are begotten, by the teaching that comes from Yahweh, from heaven. Right? And no other place on this earth is bringing forth that teaching. Right? It was given to the house of Yahweh, no one else. It's only Pastor have the keys for the kingdom right now. Several times Yahshua and Yakan and Moses said, he said the kingdom of Yahweh is at hand. Several times he said the kingdom of Yahweh is at hand. Well, what directly they were talking about? Right? What directly they were talking about? What they meant with that statement is, this is the opportunity that you have. That is the opportunity. So right now the kingdom of Yahweh is at hand for us. This is our opportunity to qualify. What are we going to do? As I mentioned before, you can't mix new wine in an old sack. We have to totally get rid of that Christian thinking that we came into the house of Yahweh with. Right? Totally get rid of that. What we have to realize is Yahweh set up that administration, right, or that headship. Yahweh, Yahshua, Yisrayl Hawkins, the priest under Yisrayl Hawkins. That is the administration that Yahweh set up. There's no jumping around. There's no jumping around that administration. Right? Anytime anyone try to get in any other way is a thief and a robber. We have to follow that set pattern. Have to follow that set pattern. Right? That is the kingdom of Yahweh. When it speak about the seventh work, we have to go back also and remember what he told Moshe how to make the tabernacles. Speak about a specific pattern. Moshe could not have deviated from that pattern, because it was commanded to him by Yahweh. It says, make all things according to that pattern. Never told him to deviate from it. And remember what we are sitting on. We are on the foundation of the prophet and the apostles, and Yahshua being that chief cornerstone. Yahshua set that perfect example. Right? He set that perfect example. And that is the example that Yisrayl Hawkins is following. When we look at the scripture, it says Yahshua is the ultimate result of keeping Yahweh's law. Right? He is the ultimate result. Anyone ever check and see what that word ultimate means? No one ever checked it out? Okay, it means maximum. Ultimate means maximum. Meaning, well, look, you can't get nothing better than that. You can't get nothing better than Yahshua. That's what it's saying. The ultimate result, the maximum result of keeping Yahweh's laws. Right? And Yahshua set that example for us. And Yisrael Hawkins is following that example. The seventh trumpeter, the seventh work is following that example. Right? And we are blessed to be part of that seventh work. Right? You know, as Shaul said, he said, don't neglect your calling. Right? He said, don't neglect that calling. Don't do things that will disqualify ourselves from this great administration. We should be joyful, you know, to be part of this work. Very, very joyful. Because we are the one that Yahweh actually called out of billions of people. Billions of trillions of people. And when we look at it, Yahweh didn't have to call us, or he didn't have to allow us to come into existence around this time. He could have allowed us to come into existence between two works where there's no hope of salvation. So look very carefully. That's why the Apostle Shaul said, don't neglect that calling. Take it very serious. Right? Take it very, very serious and get our minds focused on overcoming sin, because as Pastor said in verse 2, the war is definitely coming. Right? The two works traveling together. Now, let's just look at Revelation 7 here, because it fits right in going back to this word theta, where it means to bind and seal. Right? And Pastor in verse 2, Pastor said the war is coming. Now, Revelation 7 verse 1 said, and after these things I saw 4 Malachim standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, so that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another Malach ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Father. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 Malachim, that to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. Now, to hurt, meaning, well, look, this war that Pastor said is coming. Okay, verse 3 said, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the tree, until we have sealed the servant of our Father in their forehead. So we see exactly why the war haven't come as yet. This sealing, this tethering to the choicest branch or the tree, that has taken place. That is what holding back all this war from coming. So who the kingdom of Yahweh is waiting on? It's waiting on us to complete that seal. Yahweh and Yahshua show Yisrayl Hawkins, well, look, his work is not in vain. The people is intensively looking towards Yisrayl Hawkins for that guidance. That is what is showing us. Right? We are looking intensively to see what we have to do to qualify for the kingdom of Yahweh. Let us move on to page 30, verse 38. Let us go back to verse 37. But you have got to remember the protection that Yahweh showed that we have. And if you look at the prophecies and you see like where the beast system is being prophesied of, even so often the prophet will put a verse or two about his work. And one of those such scripture he put out that there's a place of protection. That there is a place of protection. Another place is where he talks about 1,000 falling, but it would not come near you. And of course, he doesn't say, and of course, he does say he's going to protect this worker. It's not going to fall. Right? This work is not going to fall. He is not going to allow it to. First off, we have got to resurrect all who have died before us. We are going to be the ones who are given that power. So coming back, right back to Genesis 1:26, to make mankind in Yahweh's image and to give them ruling authority. We are the sons of man that will receive this. To understand Yahweh, the understanding Yahweh, if you could get this in your mind, we do have a big job painted in the scriptures that is pointed out to us that Yahweh already have lined up, right? A big job waiting on us. And looking at the news program sometime this week, they showed over RT. They mentioned, I think the headline was Goldilocks Galaxy. Right, Goldilocks Galaxy. And it says science estimates 8.8 billion planets just right for life. They now figure that out. Right, but we know what is taking place. 8.8 billion planets just right for life. And that is something Pastor told us a very, very long time, and they're not figuring that out. Imagine that. Something we have learned long time, they're not figuring that out. Right? And even in one of their magazines, what's it called? Nicodolians. Can't remember the name of the magazine. Smithsonian's. Yeah, that is it, Smithsonian's. They say that scientists only discover of a mere 4% of the universe. A mere 4% of the universe. Right, so what about the other 96%? And this is what Yahweh have created for us. Remember, the earth is just a trading ground for us right now. That is what the earth is for, a trading ground for the Son of Man, to qualify, to move further on. Right? And I find that was pretty, they just keep on backing up everything that Pastor is showing us and Pastor is explaining to us constantly. Verse 38 said, the understanding Yahweh, if you could get this in your mind, we do have a big job painted in the scriptures that is pointing out to us that Yahweh already have lined up. He lined this up along with his plan, the plan to create mankind in his own image. He said the two things that he requires are, one, keep his appointments with him. That is one of the key things of qualifying or the qualification. Right? Keeping his appointments, keeping the Sabbaths. Right? What we have to remember, anytime when we keep the Sabbath the way that Yahshua kept the Sabbath, what we are showing Yahweh that we are in total agreement with him. When we keep the Sabbath the way Yahshua kept the Sabbath, we are showing Yahweh that we are in totally agreement with him. Now, when we come to service, what we are doing, we are coming to receive instruction. When we come to service, we are coming to receive that instruction. But what we do with that instruction, it's totally up to us. Totally up to us. Right? So, let us keep these things in mind and let us continue, to be steadfast in looking towards that olive tree and looking towards that olive tree, Yisrayl Hawkins, and to focus our mind on qualifying for the kingdom of Yahweh. So with this, will you all please stand? I'd like to turn the class over to the great Kohan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We're going to continue on where the great Kohan left off. He mentioned about these planets them discovering these planets, and that's a nice topic on its own, but what they don't mention on those planets is it disproves the Big Bang Theory, and they all understand this. All of these physicists understand this, because you cannot get planets from the Big Bang, and they thought, well, maybe just one. One by accident, Earth, but so that was why they thought for sure there's no other planets. They had a reason for believing that. It's because their Big Bang Theory, of course, doesn't work for anything, but it really does not work for planets, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and they're not talking about it, and that's really what has them so interested. It's not so much that they've discovered these planets, it's that they've disproven their own Big Bang Theory, and they're trying to figure out how to backtrack and get out of this and before they tell everyone. But we're going to go on verse 38, and where it says, as the Quran left off, it says, "Trust in Him and do what He says. If you do that, don't go by your feelings, Well, I feel like I've let Yahweh down. I'm doomed. I'm done for." I think this is one of the types of thoughts we can get in our mind. This is one of the things the Peaceful Solution tells us about, which is the types of thoughts that we get, like cool thoughts and hot thoughts. But what Pastor is saying, believe what the prophets said. The prophets said, go to the priest and do what he said. Don't trust your own feelings. It'll get you in trouble big time. Your feelings will go up and down like tides, and with the tides sometimes in the moon, Well, what Pastor is saying here is we've got to think with our mind. We've got to think rationally and logically, and this is what Yahweh is actually teaching us to do. In so many ways, for many of us who have been in the House of Yahweh for all this time, Israel Hawkins is teaching us everything. It's not just the scriptures, but it's anything else we do. And I think most of us notice this. There's a certain way we approach topics or anything that we need to learn. And we approach them in the same way that he has approached the scriptures, which is through a foundation of study, of actually understanding the topic, and then applying more understanding on top of understanding. And this is not how the world thinks. It's a totally different way of thinking. Verse 39, if you turn over to Isaiah 66, Yahweh shows here his appointments with mankind, and all through the Holy Scriptures he harps on us believing on what the prophets have spoken. And this is the opposite of believing in our heart. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't have it lined out in the prophets, and we haven't seen it yet, all of it, future commandments for us to follow in order to get to the moon or to the different planets. And he does these things. Yahweh does. Yahweh can look down in advance and plant a donkey on a cloud billions of years before, have it lined up for the firmament to take care of it. And this is one of the foundational beliefs that we have. It's the foundation for our other beliefs, is this ability that Yahweh has to predict the future that's evidenced by the scriptures themselves. And Pastor always goes back to this. No one else can predict the future, but the prophecies show the future. And the only way you understand that is by studying. And you can see that this book that was obviously around thousands of years ago, in different parts of it, has predicted what has come to pass, as with the temple. And this is a major foundation of our belief, is Yahweh's ability to prophesy the future. Verse 40, in the firmament itself, he's allowing it to be destroyed somewhat. Now, this is what we see. It's going on today. The firmament being destroyed, and of course the earth is suffering for it. It's been going on for years, and the people have suffered drought. They've suffered hurricanes and earthquakes, but all of this is increasing now, as Yeshua said it would for this time period. And the world is even recognizing this, something going on with the firmament, and they call it global warming. And of course, you've got the people that are saying global warming is occurring, and you got the people that are saying global warming is not occurring. The only way we can know is by the scripture, and the scripture says global warming is occurring. But it's like Pastor brought out a few weeks ago with their solution. They've got a solution for this, and it's called Nimrod in the scriptures. And they're going to take this firmament, this global warming, and they're going to, like they do every other curse of sin, the governments of mankind will take the curse and they'll use it to plunder the people. That's what they're going to do with this global warming. They're going to take this curse and they're going to apply Nimrod to it. And I don't know if you've seen what Nimrod looks like when it comes to global warming, but it's called this carbon tax. And they're going to take the carbon tax, and what they're going to do is they're going to apply a fake cure to the problem. They're not going to solve it, but they're going to get billions and billions of dollars out of this. And this is a prime example of Nimrod. And this is the same practice. What they're going to do with this global warming is the exact same practice that Cain used. This is his religion. It's his system. It's this system of socialism that they're going to apply. In fact, I think it was the Austrian Prime Minister said, this carbon tax for global warming is nothing but socialism. And if you listened a few weeks ago, you could translate that. This carbon tax is nothing but Nimrod. And that's what they're going to do. They're not going to solve the problem, but they're going to cause the people to go into austerity, into abject poverty because of this system they're going to apply to this thing. And it's already occurring. They've forgotten, if you notice, they're not talking about the hungry. They used to talk on the news about the poor people and the hungry people in the world. They're not talking about that anymore. They're talking about global warming, because that problem is a bigger moneymaker for them. And so now the poor people, they're getting poorer, and the hungrier people are getting hungrier, because the carbon tax in these countries, which is not stopping the global warming, is causing the hungrier people to starve even more. And this is Nimrod in action. This is the religion of Cain, the government of Cain, the government of Hitler, the government of a lot of governments on planet Earth is being applied now to this climate change, and they call it the carbon tax. Verse 52, let's go to verse 52. Pastor says, "For by the fire and by his sword will Yahweh plead with all flesh." He's not causing this, he's allowing this. At the same time, we're saying, his house of Yahweh is saying, come out from among them and be separate. Now this word here, there's a couple of important words in this verse, but one of them is by, the word by. And if you look up that word, it's a word that has like 30, 40 meanings. And the world will read this and it'll say, Yahweh is coming with the fire. Like he's going to make, he's the one with the fire, and he's the one that's going to burn you. But as Pastor explains, he's not causing this. The fire is the nuclear war. But he's coming with it because the prophecy says this last day's work is going to exist at the same time as this nuclear burning, because of this other word here, which is the word plead. It says Yahweh will plead with all flesh. Now, a lot of people will look at that word and they can picture Yahweh saying, please, oh please, will you listen to me? As a meaning for the word plead, but it's a legal term. And if when you go to court, you file pleadings. And this is what Yahweh is doing. He's making a legal plea, which is an argument. Okay, that's what Yahweh is making. He's not sitting here going, please, oh please. He's doing some of that because your life's, it's important that he's pleading that you listen to his plea is what he's doing. He's saying, listen to this argument that I'm making here. Okay, listen to this argument, and what he is doing is, it's the exact opposite of what Pastor was talking about with this person back here saying, I'm doomed, I'm done for. It's the exact opposite of believing your heart, or going by your heart, thinking with your heart. It's listening to this pleading. And a pleading is to use arguments, and an argument, of course, is another one of these words that has many meanings, but it's not argument like someone arguing with one another. It's to state your position with evidence. Okay? It's to use arguments or persuasions as with a person for or against something. Now, persuasion means to cause to believe. When you persuade someone, you cause to believe. Argument is a process of reasoning. Okay? And this is the opposite of believing with your heart. What Yahweh is doing is he's reasoning with us. And this is what I mean by Pastor teaching us all how to do everything. Because it's this reasoning, which is a totally different way of thinking, that the human mind is perfectly capable of, but mankind has completely lost the ability to do it. It does have it to a degree, but it's been overcome by this Catholic teaching, and I want to get into that in a little bit, why they're doing that, of course, which Pastor teaches us. But argument is a process of reasoning, a series of reasons, an address or composition intended to convince or persuade, persuasive discourse, to induce to believe. Okay, that's what argument is, to prove, by appealing to the reasoning or the understanding to convince. Okay, and so when it says here that Yahweh is for by fire and by sword, in other words, at the same time as we're going to be having this nuclear war, at the exact same time, he's going to come here and he's going to present an argument for you. He's going to present something, a reason to believe him. Okay, that's what this pleading is. He's going to give you a reason to believe him, and he's going to make this reasoning is going to be a logical one. It's going to be a conclusion based on a properly drawn set of premises. Okay, and this all comes from this word plead. It's argument, plead, reasoning, logic. It's a way of thinking. It's an intelligence is what it is. It's an extreme intelligence that Yahweh is going to use, and this is what pastor does when he gets up here every Sabbath, is he's pleading with us. He is giving us the reason to believe. He's proving. Another word for plead is prove. For by his sword, Yahweh will, remember the word by, next to. Did you ever think about next to? At the same time as. Okay, it's one of those words that has meanings you don't often think of. It's like the word from. From Zion. Well, does that mean it's going to come from Zion? It's going to be away from Zion. It's the same thing with the word by. A lot of these little words, but then plead. So he's going to prove with all flesh. He's going to prove it to everyone. And Pastor says he's not causing this. He's not causing, he's allowing this. So what he's talking about, it's not Yahweh, the fire and the sword. He is allowing it. And it is a part of the pleading. It's part of the argument. It's part of the evidence. It's part of this logical flow of reasoning that will cause someone to believe something. Okay, and this is this intelligence, actually using your brain. That's what it is. And then the pastor says, and at the same time he is saying, come out from among them and be you separate, so you won't partake of these plagues that are coming. Now this, I've heard pastor talk many times, and he does say this, but this is not all he says. This is not all he says. But in a lot of ways, it is everything he says. Okay, everything he says fits into this sentence right here. Just about everything pastor says fits into this sentence. There's more to it too, but when we're presenting the evidence of the curses, which is probably half of every sermon, it's probably half of this sermon, these facts, which are then supposed to be thought about and cause you to believe something, that's what this is talking about. This is the pleading. This is like a title for the pleading that pastor is giving. The pleading is the actual arguments that apply to this. Okay, so at the same time he is saying, okay, he's teaching that you need to come out from them and be separate so you won't partake of the plagues that are coming. He's showing you how the sin causes the curses. I mean, we're getting down to the actual point of showing you the actual molecules and how they move inside your body when you do a certain sin. I mean, they've never had this before in all the history of mankind, to have the ability to say, well, you think eating that pork is okay. Well, let me show you a zoomed in part of your body, and we're going to zoom in 1,000,000 times, and we're going to show you a cell in your body, and we're going to show you what a molecule does. And of course, back then they'd be saying, what's a molecule? Well, I want to show you what a molecule does when you eat that pork and what it does to this other molecule in your body. I mean, we're getting down to that level of teaching. When pastor does that, this is what he's saying. That's what this verse is about. He's saying, come out from among them and be separate so you won't partake of these plagues that are coming. It's an explanation, okay? And it's all a part of this proof, this pleading that Yahweh is doing, which isn't the please believe me. That's a part of it, but it's the argument. It's the logical reason why you should believe. It's the proof. And you got to remember that proof is in the eyes of the beholder. What's proof to one person is not proof to another person. What is, and this is, as Yahweh says, blessed are you who believe without seeing. Blessed to you who I've proven this to with my pleadings, versus those who have to actually see the nuclear burning. Okay, and so and if you're one of these people who wants to apply their mind to this rational way of thinking, instead of this, and I'm not trying to make fun of whoever this was, of course, these thoughts come into our minds and we have to get them out, but I'm doomed, I'm done for. In other words, these emotional thoughts, when you can get to the point where you can get to that point earlier, you're more valuable to Yahweh in the kingdom. And that's why you're going to get these positions. Because that ability, that determination to understand the scriptures in this way is a quality that's necessary for leadership. Okay, and it's the opposite of what the Catholic Church teaches. Now let's go to verse 69, because here's an example of this teaching that they are teaching, and one of the things they believe. Their wealth is worthless, and going to heaven is another lie. That's not your reward at all. Your reward is to receive the authority that will only be given to the sons of man who become righteous as Yahweh is righteous. And this, of course, the Pope has been reinforcing this belief in dying and going to heaven recently, and saying you don't even need to believe, you just need to do what your conscience says is okay, which is pretty much everyone on planet Earth does what their conscience says is okay. I mean, even this man, he was just recently convicted and he was sentenced to death for lighting this woman on fire. At the time, that was perfectly okay. You know, she got him mad, and so he set her on fire. But this thinking, and you got to think about this, because if you were to ask a person why they think that when they die they're going to go to heaven, they would not be able to explain to you why they believe this. They would say, well, it's in the Bible. Where? I don't know. I just know you do. Or their grandmother dies and they'll say, well, I just know she's in heaven. How do you know that? I just do. I just feel it. This is a foundationless thinking. Okay, there's no reason for that belief. It's an appeal to the emotions, and that is not just one defective thought. It's not just one defective thought about heaven. I mean, that's a big one. It's important, but it affects every other aspect of their lives. Because they've been taught that something is true just because they believe it. And they've been taught that if they want something to be true, all they need to do is believe it. And that's where it goes. It gets to the point where they actually decide, I want this to be true, and all I need to do is believe it and try to convince others to believe it, and it will be true. And this is the problem with this, is it clashes with reality. And the clash with reality is in your body, and that's what ends you up in the hospital. That's what gets you to the hospital. You can't, it's a way of ruining a person's mind to believe that they're going to go to heaven without a foundation for that belief. It will actually ruin a person's mind. And it's like the Pope says, they kind of use these sayings to reinforce this stuff, but they'll classify this as mercy. The Pope, he's called merciful because he believes this. But mercy is teaching a person to stop their sins, because that's what stops the curses. That's what mercy is. It is hate to tell someone to continue in their sins. That's not mercy, it's hate. It's just that simple. The Pope hates mankind. Whether he knows it or not, I don't even know if he knows it, he hates mankind. Israel Hawkins loves mankind, because what he's doing is he's giving them the teachings, the foundation, the ability to think. And then the other one is love the sinner, hate the sin. And this is a big one, because this is just like you're going to die and go to heaven. But people say love the sinner, hate the sin. And if you would ask him, you say, what do you mean by love the sinner? Well, I don't know. They wouldn't have an answer for you. I couldn't even think of what they would have. But there is an answer for that, because it's actually a valid saying if it's understood. Love the sinner means teach the sinner to stop sinning. Educate him about the curses that will come because of his sins, and show him that he's going to experience these curses. But if he stops, those curses won't come to him or his children. That's what loving the sinner is. Okay, so that's what we do. We love the sinner. Loving the sinner is not saying, you're okay, you're going to go to heaven anyway, don't worry about it. That's not loving the sinner. That's hating the sinner. And then hating the sin, you can't hate a sin. Hating the sin is, a sin's not an object. Hating the sin is teaching against the sin. That's what hating the sin is. I mean, I'm just saying it's like one of these nebulous phrases. We hate the sin because we teach people to not sin. The Pope loves the sin because he teaches people to desire sin. And that's what loving sin is. Loving sin is sinning, or desiring sin. And the Pope does both those things. So when they say the Pope loves the sinner and he hates the sin, you got to flip that around. He hates the sinner and he loves the sin. That's what Catholicism is. Hating the sinner and loving the sin. It's not mercy, it's hate. It's not love, it's hate. They've got everything back, upside down. So we have to cease supporting sin, cease encouraging sin, we have to discourage sin, and we have to expose it. That's what loving the sinner is. That's what loving the sinner is, not what he's doing. What he's doing is loving the sin and hating the sinner. And the reason now, if you've ever, it's almost like, why would they even do this kind of thing? Why would anyone teach someone to believe they're going to heaven without any foundation? And why would they not even want them reading the book to see that they're wrong? And why would they use these vague phrases so people don't understand what it is you're saying? And you have to understand the adversary system, and that Satan is an adversary, and the Pope is Satan's agent. And it's like in any court case you see, when you get someone accused of a crime, you'll see the prosecution will try to be getting the evidence from the defense. Like we got this bag of pot out of his car, and the defense will be saying, no, we don't want you to use that, and they'll be fighting in court. And then the defense will say, well, we want your evidence to the prosecution, and the prosecution will hide it. And they'll say, no, we're not going to give you that evidence. And they'll argue in court, and the two are basically arguing over what evidence they're not going to give. And that's the adversarial nature. Mankind is to Satan an adversary. And her goal is to keep us as stupid as she possibly can. Just like in the courts. She's just like the prosecutor who doesn't want the defense to have any evidence. That's the Pope. The Pope, and the way he does it is by diverting you, by not giving you any information. But it's worse than that. He gives you fake information so that you don't even ask anymore. So no, I'm going to heaven. I don't need to worry about that problem. I'll just, because what occurs when you die is something people would ordinarily think about. Well, don't worry about it. Just do what your conscience says, and you're going to go to heaven. Okay, well, now I can move on to my job. What do I do for a job? It ends that question. So, when seen in the context of an adversarial scenario, you can understand why she doesn't want you to know, because she wants to defeat you. That's why. The Pope's purpose is to defeat the people. Remember, he hates the sinner and he loves the sin. Okay, that's what he does. And he has no mercy whatsoever. All he has is hate. That's what he has. So whenever you hear that, anytime they say he's so merciful, just remember that. I know we all know that, but it's this love the sinner and hate the sin. See, we're supposedly hating the sinner because we're telling the sinner that if you do this, you're going to get sick and die. Okay, now let's go to verse 70. Well, the donkey is just staring at the branch, that chosen branch, and Yahweh showed there intensely. He's not tied with a rope, but he's tied with loyalty and unity. And it's a loyalty and it's a unity that is made of fibers of this pleading that Yahweh has made. It's based on understanding. It's based on the arguments that Yahweh has given to us. It's based on intelligence. It's based on truth. That's really what a pleading is. It's based on truth. It's based on the proof that Yahweh has brought to us, this loyalty. It's actually based on education, is another way of putting it. We love Pastor, we love the House of Yahweh because we're educated. The people in the world love the Pope because they're ignorant. It's exactly true. They love the Pope because they're ignorant. That's the reason they love the Pope. Now let's go to verse 81. This is an interesting one. This applies today. But even 20%, if you think about it, 46 million Americans in 1 year diagnosed with mental illness. 10 years, 10 times that. Now, Pastor's going on how the mental illness is caused by the sins, including eating pork, which they never speak about. All these healthcare shows, I watch these health people and doctors, and they're always talking about what you need to do, and they're always talking about corn syrup. Stop eating corn syrup, and they got a few other things that they just don't like, but they never mention pork. And one of them just recently went in for a checkup, and he said, I cannot believe I have this thing. He had some kind of a colonoscopy, and he's like, I follow my own advice, and I still have this disease. And I feel like calling him up and saying, yeah, that's because you're still eating pork. But you're not eating any corn syrup, but that's not helping you. What you have to do is follow Yahweh's laws. So now we have this mental illness now, and they just covered this tonight in the news, and Sibelius, who is, I've mentioned her before, she's come up with a solution now. So actually, we could probably cut this part of the Book of Israel out because we probably don't need Yahweh's laws according to her. Her idea is to force, and they're going to do this, they're going to force everyone to have mental health insurance. That's the new, but don't worry because it's free. And so it's not, I don't know if anyone's ever gone to a psychiatrist, but psychiatrists work with lawyers. Psychiatrists and lawyers, because no one is ever going to go. Psychiatrists charge psychologists, it's like $400 an hour, for 1 hour to go in there. And they make people worse anyway, but they charge $400 an hour. No one even has $400 an hour. So what they do is they've gotten together with the lawyers, and the lawyers will say, well, we got this child, we took him into custody, and they need a psychiatrist. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, how about me? I charge $400 an hour. It's like, well, great, we're not paying for it. So that's where most of their business comes from. They work for the state, and they'll take some child in custody, and they'll bill out 20, 30 hours, and they'll make like, 10, 20 grand off the state for this one child, and then you follow that child through their life, and it's a complete disaster. It's not even, it's off the radar screen in terms of how bad their life was, but you've spent 20 grand on this. Well, now we're going to have this free for everyone. Of course, it's not really free. It's really very expensive, but we're going to say it's free. Because remember the Nimrod system. That's how the Nimrod system works. Everything's free. And so that's how they're gonna solve this. Instead of saying, wait a minute, why are we having this mental problems in the first place? No one. But the reason is, the ones thinking about this are mental. The problem is that these people that are in charge, they need the psychiatrists more than anyone else, and so that now they're going to give these people these drugs, which are the same drugs that are causing these mass shootings. So now there are going to be more people on these drugs because now they're free. They're free until someone has to sign up for them, but they're free for now. They're going to have the free drugs, and then they're going to have more of these because no one has the sense to say, I wonder why we're all going crazy. And no one even asks why we're going crazy. They don't even consider it that there might even be a cause. They don't ask and get the wrong reason. They don't even think about it. It's not even anywhere in their mind to think there might be a reason for this. They're just thinking, how can we use this to promote Nimrod? How do we apply Nimrod to this? Well, I know we'll offer them free psychological evaluations. And that's what they're going to do. And everyone looks around and they say, well, we want anything that's free. Now, verse 82, and this is what Pastor says, this is what you're functioning with. Those that eat swine's flesh, your brain is a part of that pig. Okay, there's the answer right there. This is why the answer to the big mental illness problem we have is to give free mental insurance, mental health care insurance, and to force everyone to buy it. So I know a lot of people can barely pay their bills as it is. I know you wanted a car, but instead of a car now, we're going to give you free mental health care insurance. How would you like that? And try to drive to work with that. But that's what they're going to do. And then, of course, all of society just goes downhill. It just goes downhill economically because of these Nimrod solutions that they apply. And if you could think of what you're bringing your brain down to by feeding it swine's flesh, if you feed it with the proper food, and this is the solution right here. This is what Sibelius should say. If you feed it with the proper food that Yahweh says to feed it, the foods that are clean, your brain will start functioning properly. It will take a while, but it will work. It works. Yahweh's way works. And we have this actually proven. We've actually proven it. We've proven it among ourselves, and we can prove it among other groups. And anyone that wants to give us the opportunity, we can prove it with them. We can prove it with people that have been in prison. We can prove it with anyone. We can take anyone's mind and bring them to the point of being sane again. Gradually, slowly but surely, if the person will stay with us and follow the teachings of the House of Yahweh. That's really all it takes. Of course, there's going to be some people that there's no hope for because they're just going to leave. But eventually, everyone will get cleaned up, and that's what Yahweh is doing. He's pleading with all flesh. He's going to convince everyone that this is true. It's just a matter of how much convincing it's going to take. That's going to establish your position in this kingdom. So with that, let's say closing prayer. Father Yahweh, this is Kwanzaa Fanda, along with the great Kwan Malaki, seeds of the last days, witnesses, Israel Hawkins, your son, our high priest, Yeshua, Messiah, along with the great men of your class, in unity with the body of priests, giving you great thanks, Father, for this class, the Sabbath, the understanding, the protection that you've given to us, this opportunity to be a part of this great kingdom. We do pray, Father, to be able to resist the temptations of Satan, to see these things in our own minds, to correct them as soon as possible, to think with our minds, to think with righteousness, with righteous thoughts that we are learning, instead of with our hearts, and to bring our hearts to full perfection, so that we desire only to keep your laws and we are repulsed by all sins. We do pray, Father, for the protection for all those in your house, for the protection of those who are traveling. We do pray for the sick, that they're healed, that they're comforted, that they understand the things that they need to do. And we also pray for those who are in prison, the great Kohan Yedidia, that they are released soon, and we know we can bring this message to the whole world. You're helping us, and we do pray, Father, that continues, and that you protect those who are helping us in that, whether they're in the house or not. In Yeshua Messiah's name, hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.